organization called Act for America, and you can access information on her group at actforamerica.org. And we want to talk to Brigitte for the next few minutes about the Middle East and what's happening there and get her thoughts. Brigitte, Tim and Ray here, thank you for being our guest again.
Thank you for having me on the show. I'm glad to be back with you.
Well, you grew up in Lebanon, right?
Yes.
Which is next door to Syria.
Correct.
And what's different about Lebanon? Lebanon and Syria used to be vastly different, but is there much difference now today between Lebanon and Syria?
Well, Lebanon has changed dramatically over the last 20 years, and in particular over the last 10 years. And that's with the rise of Hezbollah, which is a proxy army of Iran. The Christians fled the country. There's only about 20% Christians remaining. So the country basically transformed into becoming a terrorist hub right now, controlled by Iran and supported by Syria, because this is exactly why Hezbollah in Lebanon is standing very strong in support of the Assad regime and ensuring the protection of the Assad regime in Syria, because Syria is the base from which all weapons have been funneled from Iran through Syria and into Lebanon to the hands of Hezbollah. So it's in the best interest of Hezbollah in Lebanon to keep Assad in power in Syria and basically appear that they are a part of the greater Syria.
Folks, I want you to understand, I mean, I know you, if you listen to this program, we're trying to help educate, not that you don't pay attention already, educate you about, these are important issues taking place in the Middle East which affect the world. We cannot ignore them, and especially we as Christians need to be informed about what's happening over there so we can pray for our brethren, but we also can know how to think in terms of Israel and the Christians that, as I said, are in that part of the world. Let me ask you this. Syria is is a country, as I say, north of Israel to the east of Lebanon, and they've been in a civil war now for, 3 or 4 years. I mean, tens and tens of thousands of people have died in this war. You got the Assad, he's the dictator there who's trying to hold on to power. You've got his forces, which have been backed by Russia and others. And then you've got the rebels, the so-called rebels they're fighting each other. Who are the rebels?
Well, the rebels are a mixture of the Muslim Brotherhood and different radical Islamic organizations like Al-Nusra Party, as well as Al-Qaeda. And right now, they are the radicals rising to establish basically an Islamic government in in Syria. And this is what people need to understand in the West. The rebels in Syria are not some freedom fighters who are just rising against the Assad regime because they want to bring democracy to Syria. The people who are rising in Syria right now are the same Muslim Brotherhood that tried to rise 30 years ago in Hama against his father, Hafiz al-Assad at the time, the father of Bashar al-Assad, where Hafiz al-Assad bulldozed 30,000 of them and killed them in a matter of few days. So right now, and especially after the revolution in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria looked at Egypt and realized if there was ever a chance for us to rise and win and take over the government, this will be it, because it looks like Obama and America are on the side of the quote-unquote pro-democracy movement in the Middle East. They have helped elect and get the Muslim Brotherhood into power in Egypt. And therefore, if we rise against a dictator, Assad, who's just like Mubarak, America is going to come to aid the rebels, and we're going to be able to oust Assad.
The difference here is, one of the differences is here, correct me if I'm wrong, but Mubarak, the president / dictator of Egypt for all those years, he was had a good relationship with America and help keep the peace there between Egypt and Israel, and the Suez Canal, keep it open, and so forth and so on. With Assad in Syria, same type situation. He's also a dictator. His daddy was a dictator. the Syrian people. That's how things work in that part of the world. You either have a strongman dictator or you have a Islamic government. And this Assad has not been pro-Western. He's been more had a relationship with Russia, I don't know, China, Iran, you mentioned, for example. So he has been sort of hostile to the U.S. Over his. Would that be an accurate representation?
Yes, it is accurate. And one thing I would like to mention is that at least Mubarak in Egypt was a huge ally in the United States and provided the United States with the top intelligence coming out of the Middle East after Israel. Since September 11th, Egypt provided us with the best intelligence, working with the Jordanians and the Israelis about the whereabouts and the terrorist activities of terrorist organizations and their leaders. So basically, by us getting rid of Mubarak and throwing him under the bus, we got rid of a true and trusted ally that had proven himself, and basically replaced him with the Muslim Brotherhood. In Syria, Assad is a dictator, but when you look at what's if we have to choose between Assad the dictator or the new radical movement rising in Syria to replace him, Assad will be the lesser of the two evils, because look what we have in Egypt right now when the Muslim Brotherhood took control. I mean, Morsi became more of a dictator than Mubarak ever was, to the point where the people and the army rebelled against him and threw him out. But that's what we're seeing happening in Syria right now. These are the rebels who are rising.
Brigitte, let me ask you about what seems to be the evolving U.S. position, that we are not going to commit any soldiers on the ground, and that it's going to be some kind of pinpointed strikes to degrade his capacity to attack.
Degrade who, Ray?
Assad's.
Okay, the dictator.
Assad's, the dictator. But specifically, it's been said 2 or 3 times, the goal is not to overthrow the Assad regime. In that case, if that's what we're going to do, in your judgment, what's going to be the likely outcome of that strategy?
There is no good outcome to that strategy, because we don't have any strategy. And when you are just shooting in the wind, you can, fire your arrow anywhere and nothing's going to happen. And that's exactly how we are handling Syria. And I think President Obama realized over the last year, since this whole problem developed in Syria, that even though a year ago he came out and he said, if the use of chemical weapon, if you cross the red line, we will act. I think a year later he realized that the things have changed in Syria so much. This is exactly why we sat on the sideline before this attack on August 21st with the chemical weapons. Obama, you can see how he changed his mind in Syria. That's why he wasn't eager to go in and get rid of Assad anymore, because he realized after what we saw happening in Egypt that we really cannot trust the rebels who are rising against the Assad regime. However, right now he is trying to save face only. That's the reason for the whole, we want to go in and we want to, basically spank Assad a little bit for being a bad boy and using chemical weapons on his people. But there's no outcome. There is no strategy. Actually, the ramification of an attack are far worse than whatever we're going to be accomplishing. And here is why. Because for the last year, since the rebels and the army had been capturing territories and moving territories, the lines have been blurred, because the army captured territory and then the rebels took it back. Meanwhile, we have lost track of where exactly those chemical weapons that Syria has are located right now. Not only because some of the territory was captured by the rebels, but also because we know that the Assad regime have moved some chemical weapons. So if we go into Syria right now and we bomb just a very limited strike on Syria, we're going to bomb certain places, we do not know exactly at this point where these weapons are. What if by accident we hit one of these chemical stashes of weapons and we truly create a chemical disaster in Syria? What is America going to do then? How are we going to explain that to the world? We're getting ourselves into such a tight situation, going in with blindfolders on, that this is truly flies against all thinking, all logic, all strategy. It is a formula for disaster, and this is exactly why we at Act for America, we are now the largest national security organization in the United States. We have a petition on our website urging the president not to drag us into war with Syria and also not to stop funding the rebels in Syria.
Talking to Brigitte Gabriel. Brigitte, what is your website?
actforamerica.org. I urge all our listeners to go sign that petition. This is the time when we still have a chance to influence decision on Capitol Hill. We need you to call and sign that petition. Call the White House. We have numbers on our website. Make sure you make your voice heard now before it's too late.
Yeah, I don't understand. Of course, we're not privy to all the information that obviously the president would have at his disposal, or the leaders in the Congress who, as I'm reading this, I guess John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, backs a military strike on Syria. But I'm like you, Brigitte, I don't understand. You know, I'm not always against a military strike. Sometimes it's necessary, and you like to think you can trust our leaders. But in this case, we're talking about a civil war that there are no good players. There's no good side to be on here. And us launching weapons from the Mediterranean Sea or from planes that might fly over just doesn't, I don't see what we're trying to, unless they're trying to take out those chemical weapons. They know where they are. You said they don't know maybe where they are. That would be, to me, the only thing that would possibly be worth going into to destroy. But this just seems, I don't understand, and two, I don't understand from President Obama's background. I mean, he is opposed to intervention in things like this. He criticized roundly, President Obama, President Bush and the Congress for getting involved in Iraq and Afghanistan. And here he is, getting involved in Libya and helping to oust Mubarak in Egypt. And now he's wanting evidently to us militarily to intervene in Syria. I mean, this doesn't make any sense if you look at what he campaigned on either.
It's very dangerous. President Obama has no grasp of foreign policy. He lacks knowledge and experience, and finally this is beginning to show with his administration. The country elected a community organizer and appointed him as CEO of the government. You cannot take a community organizer who lacks experience on how to manage, how to think strategically, how to move the company forward, how to play all the politics of a corporation, and appoint him as CEO. And the lack of his experience is beginning to show by the failure of our policy in the Islamic world, one major failure after another. Look at Libya, look at Iran, look at Egypt, look at the Palestinian territories, look at Lebanon, look at Syria right now. We cannot afford to drag our country into any more major decisions that are costing us millions. And by the way, an initial attack on Syria right now, the initial cost of the bombing is estimated about $500 million, followed by an average price tag of $1 billion every month. Where are we going to get this money? Our economy is in shambles. Our people are looking for jobs and not finding them. We have the sequestration. Each Tomahawk missile is going to cost $1.5 million. We haven't even replaced all the Tomahawk missiles we fired into Libya because we don't have any money. So why are we going to do this with Syria? There is no winner in this, and the biggest loser is going to be the United States.
I don't know what I can't imagine liberals being for this, but I guess Nancy Pelosi, is for it. Maybe they're for it because one of their own is in the White House. If Bush was in the White House, they would be against this kind of thing, I think.
Right. Well, now the feeling. We are basically going to war because they're feeling bad. Yeah. It's all about feelings.
Doesn't make any sense.
Since when does a country get dragged into war based on feelings and emotions? You're supposed to lead based on logical decisions about whether or not this decision is good for the country or not. Not because you feel bad that 1,400 people died. Why didn't you feel bad when 2 million Sudanese were massacred in Sudan? 3 million in Congo, altogether 5 million in the last 10 years. How come we didn't go to war in those countries when 5 million people died, but we're going to war in Syria because 1,400 people died?
Yeah. Yeah, this does seem reactionary on the part of the president to the chemical weapon deaths, from whenever it was 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago, which, I mean, I agree with it, but you just made the point perfectly. Brigitte Gabriel has been our guest. actforamerica.org is her website. Thank you, Brigitte. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
All right, Ray, we'll see you tomorrow, my friend.
We'll see you then.
Okay, folks, have a good day. Take care, and keep praying for our country. Thank you.